Everybody, Hoople's Cat here. It's Friday, August the 25th, and I've had my driveway repaired and my cable's been cut, so I'll try and upload this at work. If not, I'll have to hope that Bell Canada gets its act together and fixes it for me tomorrow. So this is the second one of my casual installment on book reviews. And the idea was that I would revisit books I've read in the past and review them for you guys. Second book in, it's not The Last Man, which I have read before, I mean to do, and it is Alas Babylon, which I've never read. I just couldn't resist it once I glanced at it. This book is from 1959, the first paperback edition was 1960, and this is the one I'm using, so if you want to get a copy and read along, it's worth it. I give this 5 out of 5, or 9.5 out of 10, because it's dated, but it was great, no two ways about it. So it's 323 pages by a guy called Pat Frank, who died in 1964. Fairly well known as an author. He also wrote a non-fiction book called How to Survive the H-Bomb and Why, which I'm going to try and get tonight when I have internet. So, as quoted briefly in the book, Alas Babylon is from the Revelations chapter of the Christian Bible, and I'm going to butcher this, but I will give it a go. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off from the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Interesting. So the edition I have, it has David Brin, who's also a fairly well-known author, does an interesting background of the story, which is actually worth reading before you read the story, and lots of food for thought. And I'm not going to do too much direct quoting from the book, as I actually wrote it down, but on page 11 of the forward, X1, I love this. At these very different extremes were the apocalypse that creators and producers fashioned to look somehow, well, attractive, especially in countless exploitive movies in which the fall of civilization was portrayed as a choice for tough, taciturn fellows to wear cool black leather, drive motorcycles real fast, and shoot a lot of bad guys wearing Mohican haircuts, without any further thought about prim laws or consequences. An ultimate liberation tale. He also goes on to say that he does not include Mad Max in that, Mad Max 1, because it actually is a deeper and better story than that, and it's actually quite horrific in parts, Mad Max. It's well worth watching. And so it is today for many preppers who are certain they will survive and will be able to murder any and all who come for their stuff. Brin says the core of Alas Babylon is the assumption that devastating calamities do not mean the end of human aspiration. It's a book about hope, and I think that's basically true. And for me as a prepper, I prep for the hope that I will survive and the people I love will survive, and that the world can rebuild again and renew again. I don't prep not to die. I think that's kind of stupid. I prep to live. You have to not die to live, but not dying is not an end. Now, Alas Babylon is about a nuclear war that happens, not specified the date, but it's in December. Bad things happen to the United States military in December, I guess, which is why I picked December. And it's possibly true, if World War III had occurred in 1960, that there would have been survival in pockets. An all-out nuclear war now, there would probably be no survival in pockets. Now, when the book was written, nobody knew about nuclear winter. So the minor, massive retaliatory strikes that Russia and America engage in with their allies, actually no allies at that point, what they engage in, there is no nuclear winter triggered. Obviously that would trigger a lot of problems if there's no real harvest for 3 or 4 years. Still, I think it's important that the survivors do try to rebuild civilization with humane principles, when of course extra resources are available to do that. Initially it will just be survival in the root and tooth of all. The book is set almost entirely in Fort Repose, which is a river town in central Florida with a limited cast of characters that become and remain human and relatable to me in 2017. So, you know, we're almost at the 58 year mark, 59 years since this book was actually written. Randy Bragg is the is the book's central protagonist, and he's basically a drunken playboy without a lot of money who lives in Florida in his old family home. And he's tipped off that a nuclear exchange is about to occur by his big brother Mark Bragg, who is the Deputy Chief of Intelligence at SAC, Supreme Allied Command. Strategic, I knew I'd screw that up. Strategic Airborne Command? Whatever. Let me know in the comments what SAC stands for. I'm unable to look it up. Their code is Alas Babylon, from the Book of Judgment, Revelations. They heard it as a child, as when they were listening to a church service, and it actually struck with them. So they used that as their terminal code word. That means drop everything, there's a massive issue, I need your help. I think a code phrase is to alert your loved ones in the group to immediately stop normal life no matter what is going on, and to crash prep is perhaps a great idea. I do have one, a code word, and I'm not going to share it, but it wouldn't come up in normal conversation. So this is from the book. He telephoned the Golden Dew Dairy and revised his delivery order drastically upward. This was Randy's first act to meet the emergency, and it was to prove the least useful. The book is full of throwaway lines like this that aren't really explored or expanded upon, that show the author that Pat Frank has thought in detail about the scenario he's writing about. And a lot of the scenario and detail is actually very relevant to us today. Without electricity, and even with it dairy milk, its fresh won't last long if stockpiled. And there are much better sources of calcium and fat than dairy. It's not in the book, that's just me. So the central premise of the book was written because everyone was scared of the missile gap at the end of the 1950s. Sputniks had took off, Soviet Union had made tremendous strides in developing nuclear weaponry and ballistic missiles in particular, and until about, I think, 1964, there were no active Polaris nuclear submarines active. So in theory, if the Russians just dropped the bombs rapidly, they could take out 90 to 95% of America's ability to use planes and ships to retaliate. So that was what they were worried about, this supposed missile gap. I mean, how many missiles do you need to destroy the world? But this was how the psychology was at the time. Now, the Soviets in our timeline did not do this, but Americans at the time were concerned that they would. It's interesting how mutual suicide on both sides could be seen as dangerous paranoia and not possible, and yet they took it very seriously. The trigger in the book is interesting. It's actually a Syrian army invasion of Jordan which threatened Israel. So nothing much has changed. So Randy in the book writes out a list and goes grocery shopping. He fills 3 carts of groceries. Bearing in mind in 1959, I'm presuming the shopping carts were an awful lot smaller than they are today. And he actually wanted to fill 6 shopping carts. The 3 shopping carts cost him $314.80. Quite often Leslie will do that with 2 shopping bags. Inflation, I guess. Randy wants to shout to all the shoppers in the store, all of you buy everything you can. But he realises they would just think he's gone mad. Preppers are used to this reaction. Later he asks his girlfriend to alert her parents and have them stock up as well. She feels they will not, and the doctor who's hanging out with them is Dr. Dan's, one of the central characters in the book, tells her, put it up to your father. as a business proposition. Tell him it's like taking out insurance. All heard that before. Nobody ever has enough insurance when they need it, that's for sure. Another great idea early on is that perhaps he should make up a small kit of delicacies. If the worst happened, this would be their iron rations for a desperate time. If nothing happened, it would all keep. He selected a jar of English beef tea, a sealed package of bouillon cubes, a jar of Swiss chocolates, and a sealed tin of hard candies, a canned Italian cheese, and a few other items. He places these in a small box. He wraps the box in aluminium foil, tin foil, and he hides it away in an old chest of drawers in his bedroom. And he actually forgets about it for quite some time, and when he actually does remember, it's actually a key thing that he's done. And it's a simple and great idea, and it's the one I'm going to steal. A luxury box to open 6 months a year into SHTF, just because you had the foresight to keep some stuff that are luxuries. Soft toilet roll, definitely coffee, things like that. What would you say for a rainy day to increase morale? We should vary with everybody, I think it's interesting. So Mark Bragg sends his wife and their two children to stay with Randy, because he's based in Omaha on the Air Force Base. Helen Bragg, his wife, is understandably reluctant to go, so Mark tells her, your job is to survive, because if you don't survive, the children won't. That is your job. There is no other way. That was my American accent. Sage advice from the guy in the Omaha bunker as the world is about to be torn apart. Would your loved ones obey clear and simple instructions to do things? Or would they follow their own path and their own timelines? Just because you think SHTF's about to happen, are they going to buy into this? They've watched you prep, they've heard you talking about it, they may have been interested, may not have been that interested. But when it comes down to go time, how confident are you that they will do what you have told them to do? Because we're all control freaks as preppers. Think about that. Maybe it's time for another discussion. Because whatever they do, you need to know. An interesting idea is the observation that Mark and Helen's children have actually been conditioned by society and school to expect a nuclear war, while all the adults in the book, 1959, just don't believe it's possible. It would disrupt trade, it would cause too many people to die, nobody could possibly win, people go on about this, but it's never going to happen, though the children believe it's going to happen. So, what part does our own current educative process play and our media play in setting us up to be conditioned to believe in an SHTF event? That's an interesting thought for you to think about. One of the other interesting things later on is Peyton, the daughter, actually says as an offhand comment quite late in the book, if I grow up, I don't want to be a fisherman when I grow up. If I grow up, I don't want to be a fisherman. And they're all horrified at that. And yet, Randy says, that's a logical response, and it is. Things we take for granted now are not going to be taken for granted if bombs drop. Now, the bombs actually drop on page 95. That's when it starts. It's kind of a slow, he wakes up because of a flash, there's rumbling and stuff like that. It's a calming dropping actually, because you've been waiting for it. No shocking Terminator style written scenes. It's calm because it's calm in thought repose. Now, the preamble of all of this is worth reading. What he does, why he does it, what he does with cash, stuff like this. It's all great stuff. But the apocalypse is the main event, and the fact that Mark has talked to Randy about World War III a lot, and has in a way conditioned his brother, is very useful. Like practicing the scenario, thinking about the scenario has really helped. He states in the book, so one stranger on the roadside meant nothing, particularly with a blinded child. His bloodkin dependent on his mission. With the use of the hydrogen bomb, the Christian era was dead, and with it must die the tradition of the Good Samaritan, because he's coming across a road accident with a woman lying there. Now that's all very well good in theory, isn't it? and Randy stops briefly anyway. He thinks that and thinks, no, I will stop. And he does stop, and it's a nice thing to do. This is really early on. It's not an ambush. This is very early on. There's nothing he does, so he drives away. So in that short scene, the author actually sets Randy up as a good person. A thoughtful, intelligent person who's actually also good. And that's a key characteristic of Randy's that goes throughout the novel. On pages 112 to 122, really interesting stuff. Mr. Quisenberry is the town banker's. Banks are local. There's no corporate takeover of the banks in 1959. And the bombs have dropped, they think, and they're hearing bad stuff. The phones are all out as soon as the first bombs drop. And he goes to work, and most of his staff show up because he's such a horrible boss. And everybody wants to get their money out of the bank. And he thinks it's a bank run. The Fed will send me some cash. Best way to stop a bank run is just to give them the money. And people try to tell him in his bank, don't, this is crazy, you idiot, it's not going to work. But Quisenberry is nothing but Mr. Normal in the book. Now he does decide not to cash out of town checks and treasury bonds. And traveller's checks as well. So that's something to take in mind. Cash is a good idea. I personally think in 2017 the banks will just all close down immediately and not open at all, and all electronic banking, including ATMs, will also be stopped. So have cash in low denomination notes and have lots of it. Spend it as soon as you can, because the idea with the war happening, like thousands of other towns and villages not directly seared by war, Fort Repose became an island. That's a powerful thing. Everything would be local and very local at that. No restocking of the stores at all. Nowhere to actually take the money out and put it anywhere. A massive cash infusion because the bank guy's trying to stop a bank run, not realising that it's the end of paper money, actually the end of money. And money quickly becomes clearly valueless to the people there. They have so much money being offered to them that they realise that it is garbage quite early on. Whereas with controlled banking shutdown, you might have longer before people actually dawn on them that the paper you're handing over for the return of beans is actually worthless. The chaos did not result from a breakdown in civil defence. It was simply that civil defence as a realistic buffer against thermonuclear war did not exist. We mainly agree, I think, that government would cease almost immediately in this type of SHTF, yet how many people would cling to the idea that help would eventually arrive for them? How many people will grab onto the idea that your existence is there to help them? I think in the shock of this, we have to be very careful about OPSEC. Do not let people know that you have preps. Really, really don't. In Florida alone, several 100,000 families were on the move, few with provisions for more than one day, and some with nothing at all except a car and money. So of necessity, they were voracious and all-consuming, like as army ants. The roadside shops, restaurants, filling stations, bars and juice stands along the 4-lane highways were denuded of stocks or put out a sign claiming so. I think this is important. Even if this mobile army is passive as it is mainly in this book, there is little to be gained from actually going shopping when everybody else is also shopping and realises that the end has come. For me, if I have the time and I don't have other stuff to do and I have plenty to do, if I get a head start on the apocalypse, yeah, I see no problem with that. Shopping locally and quickly and safely. But be warned, it's not going to last very long. Now, what are the people buying in Fort Repose on this first day of the war? Those who remember the shortage of World War II buy tyres, coffee, sugar, cigarettes, butter, the choicer cuts of beef, and nylon stockings. Yet others are thinking and bought portable radios and extra batteries, candles, kerosene lanterns, matches, lighter fuel, fluid, and flints, and first aid kits, and quantities of soap and toilet paper. You thought about it. This book was thought about. If you had 6 hours, what would you buy and why? Do you have printed lists and cash to let others hit the stores if it's safe to go there, to emergency buy for you? People buy stupid things when scared, so printed list is a great idea. It gives them direction. Go through this list, grab as much of it as you can. Here's $500 in $10 notes, go now and do it. It might be worth a try. Now you also need to talk to people who are going to do this. And are you going to go to Costco, or are you going to go to a local mom and pop store? And if you go to a local mom and pop store, you're not going to strip the stores, right? You're going to take 1 or 2 items, get a basket load. Maybe then the next person will go in after you and do the same thing. Don't make yourself a target. Now, gasoline is a central part of the story, and I'm not going to explain how. The gas station owner says, "What a damn fool, I've got nothing but money," and tells the banker, Mr. Quisenbury, "I think we'll all be walking pretty soon," and declines his money when he lends him a bit of gas so he can get home, which he does because he's been a good customer. He says, "Keep it, I don't want money." What the hell's money good for? You can't drive it, you can't eat it, and it won't even fix a flat. The gas store owner has actually sold all his tyres because of the money that was roaring through the door, and realised he didn't even keep a set for himself. Don't trade away anything, don't barter anything, don't swap anything until you really know what you do need. Keep all your cars well filled with gasoline, and consider at least 1 tank of gasoline stored. I think that's a good advice. I rotate mine every 6 months. If the car works, keep it parked once everyone else realises that there's trouble, and don't keep the tank full after using it. As empty as possible in the tank would be a good idea. The extra gasoline you have stored for emergencies, put somewhere safe. This would not be a garden shed or your garage. People will search them aggressively looking for gasoline once people realise that this is SHTF. So the war is over in the book in a single day, and there's not much description of it, though there's a really interesting point about one of the pilots who accidentally fires an air-to-air missile and hits nuclear submarines of the Russian side by accident, which really is kind of the major trigger, but they were going to go ahead and do it anyway. The struggle for those who survived the day was to survive the next, and I think we need to really get that into our heads. A massive global SHTF event. We have all our plans, we have this, that and the other. The survival struggle is to survive to the next day, and that's going to go on like that for some time. On the good news side of things in the book is that America finally gets a female president. That's assuming Clinton doesn't run, whichever Clinton decides to run in 2020 and wins. In the book they get a female president who's a minor low-ranking cabinet minister who happened not to be in Washington DC when the bombs went, because that was the first target. She declares martial law everywhere in the affected zones where there's no government, but there's no troops to go in anyway. So declaring martial law in those zones just allows anybody who is there, who is, quote, Leo, to use deadly force if they have to, because she understands that they can't run the country as a country anymore. She's taking the safe areas and trying to make them on war footing. But it made me think, would Trump's Florida resort be warranting a bomb or two target on it? You know, if you live down there, you may have felt fairly safe. I don't know what's near it, but now you probably aren't. Targets change, and old targets remain and don't get switched sometimes with nuclear weaponry. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Now, by the end of the first day, either Orlando or a nearby army base gets hit by a nuclear bomb. They never find out which, and it really doesn't matter which gets hit. This ends electricity for Fort Repose, and, to quote from the book, thus the lights went out, and in that moment civilization in Fort Repose retreated 100 years. Definitely 150, maybe 200 for us, maybe a bit further. We're very, very dependent now on electricity, which they're not really in the book. Now, one of the interesting things I found in the book was they used a substance called butene sulfate, B-U-T-Y-N, sulfate, as a cream to rub around eyes of people who've got flash burns from flash blindness from the looking at the nuclear ball of light, because they remembered that they used it for sailors in the Second World War who'd been stuck on lifeboats for a while. So I'm going to have to look this up when I have internet and have a look at it, because anything like that would be a very useful thing to stop for this sort of emergency. Chapter 7, page 145, starts by listing everything that now stops without electricity. It's a sober read. The emergency radio station tells them the obvious: boil all drinking water, do not drink fresh milk, do not use the telephone, and in the Sunday morning hours after the destruction of Orlando, au revoir Mickey Mouse, warnings to take shelter and guard against fallout and radiation. Yet, as the author notes, the telephones hadn't worked since the first mushroom cloud was seen on the horizon. No one is delivering anything, and there are no shelters. A basement that won't flood is a great idea for anybody to have, and lots of good quality trash bags to fill with soil before it gets exposed to radiation to add barrier above the ground and on the sides of it are also a great thing. So the average wooden old-fashioned house like I have can sustain about a foot of soil. It's nice to have about 2 to 3 feet of soil. To do that you'd have to have beams and wood beams and shove them to extra support the ceiling. So that's something you might want to consider investing in. So Randy in the book runs out of water very early on. Shocked he is because he had quite a large cistern. Turns out his niece Peyton, the girl, flushes every time she goes pee-pee. She's been trained to do this from birth pretty much. So what normal behaviours do you and your family have now that you need to immediately stop in SHTF would be my question. Not 3 or 4 days later when you realise it's not sustainable or it's causing you a problem. Have you written these behaviours down and discussed them with everybody so people know what to do? For example, my Leslie uses masses of toilet paper when she goes for peeing. She just grabs it. And that's fine now, but in grid down, it's not such a good idea. So I've already cut up lots of linen rags to use for our day one as toilet paper. The paper will be removed and would only be used in deep winter when it's frozen solid. It's hard to wash the pee and the poo rags, and when we're very sick. And she knows I'm going to do that. I don't think she believes I'll do it to her, but I will. I also have an impressive supply of old newspapers that Free Local Paper keeps delivering once a week. I stock them up in my somewhat untidy garage. And that's also something you might want to think about. Though for me, I'm actually stocking the newspaper as a fire tinder, not necessarily for toilet roll. However, the book's a nice book, it's a happy, hopeful book, so Randy actually uses that setback to figure out how to use an old abandoned well on his property that his Negro neighbours are using as well, their water source, how to reuse it for him as well as his neighbours, and he actually progressively spreads this out as the book goes on to other homes in his immediate neighbourhood. So yes, he has a well and he's safe because he has water, but he actually then invests time and energy getting that water to his other neighbours as well, realising that they are essential to his community, to his survival, and that's something I think people need to think about as well. Do you have enough pipe, do you have enough tubing to actually run surplus water from your area to somebody else's? Randy also realises after the bomb drops that salt wasn't on his list, but he finds one shopkeeper willing to sell some for a literal fortune. He can't quite believe the guy still was taking cash, and he literally gives him a fortune in cash for this. And I think large quantities of salt are a hole in most preppers' stocks. I know some people keep going on about it, but I haven't took it on board. I'm just calculating I need about 250 kilograms, 500 pounds of salt for an ongoing year on type event, and I'm certainly nowhere near that quantity, so that's something I could cheaply and easily fix, and I probably will do in the near future. Randy also gets a large number of canning lids given to him free by another storekeeper because nobody does that anymore, which I think is kind of amusing. So luck and previous good relationships with neighbours play a crucial role in letting Randy and his group survive as the situation continues on. So death occurs often in this book, as it would in reality, and without sensationalism. Randy's girlfriend, his emotional life is confused in this book, by the way, loses her mum due to a lack of insulin, which they knew about before the bombs dropped and tried to do something about, but it didn't work. Her mum had built her retirement palace in Florida, but the house had no fireplace because she doesn't like soot, and it's an unlivable monument to the old world. When she dies, the only thing they can find in the house of any use to them in the new reality is an old massive cast iron pot that her mum Lavinia had bought because it looked good as an ornament. When her grave was finished, they wrapped Lavinia's emaciated body in her bed sheets. Her coffin was an electric blanket and a hearse a wheelbarrow. What are you going to do with bodies in SHTF? Bodies of your loved ones? Because they will die, probably. Have a workable plan, as death is the only certainty in SHTF life. I'm sure taxes will return as a certainty, but early on we can forget about taxes, hopefully. How downproof is your home and reality for month on living? Can you repair your roof and seal up any broken windows or doors? Do you have the materials now available to do so? 5 months after the day starts, chapter 8, page 159 goes 5 months forward. These flash forwards work very well in this book. For example, he was hungry. He was always hungry. No matter how much he ate the night before, he was always starving in the morning. He never had enough fats or sweets or starches, and the greater part of each day was usually spent in physical effort of one kind or another. That's what it's going to be like. Radio is also failing, as the stations have all run out of gasoline by this point. To get the news from town 18 miles away from where they are takes 2 days of foot travel before they find out what's going on there. However, being a hopeful book, Randy has a retired naval admiral who actually wanted nuclear subs, and that's why he had to resign, who actually has a shortwave setup. So Randy is somewhat in the loop about what's going on, and that's important later on in the book. I'm not going to explain that because it's a spoiler. Randy also helps him figure out how to keep his batteries charged for that. But I personally have said this before, I don't think most preppers get how isolated the world will be in SHTF. Like how utterly isolated you're going to be about 3 to 5 weeks into the event. Hopefully we'll never find out. At his house, Randy has set up a bulletin board and has everyone's duties on it for the day written on it. Now this is a great idea. Get a whiteboard and a lot of pens. This is a great idea. He does this so nobody feels unwanted and is sitting around while others are working. And more importantly, all the needed tasks that he identifies each morning are done. As the book says, if everybody worked as hard as he could until sundown every day, then everyone could eat, although not well. The book does not dwell on those who are too lazy or too self-important to actually sweat hard all day long, day in, day out. Mainly everybody in the book comes together and works hard for everyone else, and including the community to some degree. There is a little bit of looting, there is a little bit of ambushing, there is a little bit of violence, but it's not a main focus of the book. It's just to show that things aren't normal. Despite some cynicism on my part, I actually believe that this is what people will do. So I'm going to wrap up. Another quote. Before the day, except in hunting or in war, a 5 or 10 mile walk would have been unthinkable. Now it's routine for all of them. But all their shoes are wearing out. So we've routinely stored our old shoes that we replace and have done for quite a few years now. So I think one of the messages for me is what is old now will be like treasure in SHTF. So it was an absolute delight to read this book. I got a huge amount out of it. For me, I would say this is a better book than Canticle for Leibowitz, written around about the same time. Really enjoyed it, and I do recommend it. I would say 9.5 out of 10 because it is a little dated, but boy, I cared, and I was made to care. And the ending, although it's an upbeat, happy-ish ending, there's a lot of stuff in this book. How they find natural salt licks by remembering what the ancestors used to tell them about the area, what foods they develop, what foods they don't eat because they're not sure they can eat them but then end up eating them. It's just chock full of almost every page of something really interesting. So, Alas Babylon, Pat Frank, buy it, read it. Try not to listen to it online. Audible books can really drag out stuff. This is a quick read and a fun read. Read the text, then you have the pacing in your own head, not in the person reading it, because then every single word is read and nothing is skipped. And we skip, and we need to skip. So if you can't, buy a book or rent a book from the library, get it online as an Audible book. But honestly, reading text is much more interesting. So that's it from me. Au revoir from Hooper's Cat. Hoping it never happens. Have a great day.